Good morning, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Wednesday, May 21st, 2025 at 10:45 in the morning. So we're back to take a little more testimony on S69. At Attorney General's office, and Todd, thank you for joining us this morning. I think there was just a question that we're trying to figure out. It's on the rulemaking, how that works, with implementing the law, timeframe it takes to implement the rules, and how does that work with businesses?
Certainly. So for the record, Todd Delos from the Attorney General's office. Thanks for having me. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Yeah. It's really nice outside. That's not an official comment. So happy to talk about S69. As I'm sure the committee is well aware, we're sort of given rulemaking in three different chunks, two specific and one more general under our broad Consumer Protection Authority. As I understand it, the committee's question is not necessarily about the specifics of the rulemaking, but more broadly how rulemaking works and any thoughts we may have on the effective dates and when rulemaking is required. So very quickly, in the past, when the AGO has had rulemaking authority, and I can speak to a bill from maybe a decade ago that was about regulating genetically engineered foods or foods containing genetically engineered ingredients. In that instance, the effective date of the law and the effective date of the rules, as I recall, were occurring. So they both occurred about a year after. It was July 1. I think it was 2016, if my memory serves. And so the AGO had a year to put those rules together and engaged in the Vermont Administrative Procedures Act rulemaking process. And, that all went together until the federal government preempted the rule about 30 days later. I say that by way of example. In that instance, with a somewhat complex but not as complex area of the law, we were able to put together the rules in about a year. That's a pretty aggressive rulemaking timeline in my experience, and I think this bill suggests what would, if passed and signed, potentially a 2-year ramp to get the various pieces of the rules, the design practices, the age assurance, and any other broad pieces of rulemaking we would engage in under the authority under Chapter 63 of Title IX. 2 years seems an appropriate amount of time. It could be somewhat shorter than that. I think another question that I understand was raised is, so what happens when the law goes into effect in 26 and then the rulemaking comes out a year later? How do businesses appropriately prepare for and reasonably understand what the regulations may look like? And I guess I would have a few answers to that. One is, as you're well aware, the law itself is the base bedrock of the rules. The rules can't materially deviate from the requirements of the law. And that's what the Vermont Administrative Procedures Act will require, is that, the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules will look at and determine whether it is in substantial agreement with the law as passed, the proposed rule, or not. So there's a check on that. I won't go into some nuance around that, but essentially, the law is still going to be what it is, independent of the rules. The rules should provide a lot more detail and explication for business. Additionally, through the Vermont APA process, there is a lot of required public engagement. And again, looking back to that GE Food experience that the AGO had, I think the same is true with some propane rules that we also oversee. There's a lot of industry engagement, and it's, in my personal opinion, extremely important to have that industry engagement to ensure that you're not creating rules in isolation that are either impossible to comply with by industry or extremely burdensome in a way that would deeply hinder commerce, and at the same time hold true to the legislative goals that are espoused in the statute itself. So that's a long way of preamble saying, and still, I think it is probably a good practice to have the two occur effectively at the same time. And if that means that the rulemaking period is slightly shorter, we will work as diligently as we can. I think a year for something that could be potentially as complex as this issue is a very, very short timeline indeed. So I would request at least 18 months for the AGO to work on that process.
Okay. So adjusting that timeline for 18 months out from July 1 of this year, possibly. Okay.
And we'll work with what you give us.
2025.
So what-
Like, that wasn't the math I did.
So
I was just wondering, in these situations, and maybe there hasn't been any where the law goes into effect, then the rulemaking concern I would have, which probably is part of what you're talking about, is what happens is after those rulemaking, you now have people that didn't know those rules.
Yeah.
And now they're not compliant, and that can.
Yeah, it's a very fair concern. I think I would respond with a couple of different pieces there. I mean, going back one, again, the rules should and would be consistent with the law. Two, the public process of rulemaking, I'm hearkening back to GFU just because that was my experience, but there are a lot of other examples. We did a lot of public education around that as well, both so that we could learn from industry about what was feasible and so that industry was well aware of what was happening, especially when, that particular law affected all the retail grocers and food manufacturers in the state. But I will also say, as a general practice of the AGO, we also work on reasonable compliance and enforcement, right? So, there's the world of ensuring that industry is aware of what's coming, and then there's the world of helping industry understand what has arrived, and then pushing industry to ensure that they are compliant with what it exists. And so that's a soft way of saying we do try and work. If there's willful noncompliance, that's a different story than someone who sort of is caught off guard and says, I didn't know. And then we look at harm, we look at understanding, we look at sophistication, and we make a determination on what enforcement looks like in that context.
I think you have a lot of discretion on whether or not you charge somebody or you educate them first.
Yeah.
Other questions? Okay. Rest of the bill off of AG's office is good with the rest of the bill, the changes that were made.
We continue to support S69. We think it is generally defensible. This continues to be an evolving area of the law. And I think folks are well aware of that. That was our testimony downstairs. Since that time, I think the committee is aware there was an additional decision in California. I think the bill is attempting to respond to that. I think Ledge Council can certainly speak to that. And I'm sure there are other advocates who can come and speak to it more broadly than I would. But yeah, we continue to support certainly the AG, as I think she came in and talked to you all as well. Yes, there's litigation risk here, and it's really important to protect our children.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Very well. Good to see you all.
Are you gonna throw you right off?
I got 5 or so votes.
So I guess the only change is trying to align the effective date. Of course, the effective date for the rules, so they begin July 1. And push it out 18 months, so rulemaking and the effective date of the law are synced.
So Rick Segel, Office of Legislative Counsel. So currently in the bill would be effective July 1st, 2026, but you'd prefer that the effective date of the bill and the rulemaking all have the same date.
Yes.
So would that be like January 1, 2027?
That worked out. Okay.
You said 27.
27. 37. Okay, so what I would do is I would add currently as Todd said, you had 2 specific rulemakings. You have the age assurance rulemaking, and then you have the design data privacy rulemaking. That one does not have a date. So I would add a date to that one of January 1st, 2027. I would change the date currently from age assurance, which is set for July 1, 2027 to January 1, 2027, and then have the act effective on January 1, 2027.
My one question in Tupperware is whether we would have rulemaking authority if the act weren't.
So then I would, because right now I do have these effective dates that give you authority earlier. So we could have the rulemaking authority begin July 1st, 2025. Okay.
Yeah.
And then have the rules due by Jan 1, 2027 and the act effective Jan 1, 2027. Okay.
What's your availability this afternoon?
I think after lunch, I'm pretty available for the moment.
We will bring you in after the floor. I think we need to get this voted out, so we can make the change of it. So we can vote this out this afternoon and get it moving. Also, 122, where are we with that?
Need to make a few more changes and then waiting on the baby bonds language. I don't know if you spoke with John this morning about that,
No. I can move them.
because I don't have that yet.
And I gotta get moving too, because that's gonna have to go to appropriations.
Yep.
If we're out of here a week from Friday, we're right up against it.
I think I can have everything except for baby bonds this afternoon.
You add one more thing.
What are you looking at?
Can you add H34 to the?
Sure.
Please.
That's passed by the House.
Yeah.
Know where that is. It's not made its way back here. Want to make sure that that's.
What about a Senate Finance yesterday?
No. They are waiting on S51, the conference committee. It's the military retirement's hanging it up. I think they're okay with the H34 language, but you never know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. So we'll come back in here to the floor. We vote at 69. So that'll be up for action Friday and Tuesday. And we'll see how far we get on 122. Probably vote that out tomorrow if we can get all the language done. Unless the language can get done today, we'll vote it today as well. Okay, I think that's it. So floor, after the floor. All right.
Okay.
So we can, any questions before we go off, Ronnie? So I do know Ways and Means is doing a straw vote on the 127 amendment. Housing, general housing, as there's planning for tomorrow. And appropriation is voting on it this afternoon, after the floor. Okay, Michael?
Process, and just because I'm a new guy. That's the end for amendments, is that correct? Like, we couldn't, as a committee, say we want to amend an amendment of an amendment.
Well, I mean, at this point, it's gonna be individual amendments that can go,
Okay.
floor amendments that can be brought up, so.
Will we have an opportunity to weigh in on floor amendments?
I don't know, the last place it went to was Ways and Means, so I think officially they'll weighing in. Doesn't mean that we won't weigh in as well, I don't know, we'll have to chat about that, see. What that process looks like.
I'm just gonna make the plea, let's get it done this year. Let's not delay it to the point that we don't get it on the books, right? We need Pepsi to start rulemaking. We need to see what it's actually gonna look like. We can tinker with it much more easily once it's a law on the books than to try to get it there. So I will continue to make that plea.
Okay. So have a great lunch. Got 2 hours to eat today. You can go real fancy.
Thanks, Jane.